We move to the co-leader of the Social Democrats, Deputy Catherine Murphy, please.
Thank you, Minister. When is Fianna Fáil going to learn the lessons of the crash that its policies led to more than a decade ago? Because I'm really struggling to understand what you're at. The Housing Minister's big innovation when it comes to restoring public confidence in An Bord Pleanála is reverting to a discredited system of political appointments that was done away with almost 40 years ago. I don't think you can make this stuff up, that we're going back in time on this. I wouldn't have thought that Fianna Fáil needed reminding of why we need to remove any prospect of political interference from the planning system. Or maybe you've forgotten about the tribunal reports. Because if your government's so-called reform of An Bord Pleanála goes ahead today, what we're going to see is the last remaining shred of credibility, its independence, going up in flames. Most of the members of An Bord Pleanála will be handpicked by the Minister, entirely at his own discretion, in a blatant and egregious political power grab. Meanwhile, as the Minister turns An Bord Pleanála into his political plaything, he is determined to remove the democratic oversight role the public is playing in the planning process. Early in the new year, he'll be bringing forward legislation that will make it as difficult and as expensive for members of the public to appeal planning decisions as is possible. Stuff An Bord Pleanála with political appointments and then make it impossible for the legality of those decisions to be challenged in the courts. There's no disguising how dangerous and deluded this is. We know from very recent history what happens when politicians say they'll speed up the planning process. It grinds to a halt. Fine Gael, with the support of Fianna Fáil, introduced strategic housing developments in 2017, changing the entire purpose of An Bord Pleanála from a planning appeals body to a forum where first instance decisions were made. The only avenue of appeal then became the High Court, and then Fine Gael ministers had the audacity to complain that the number of judicial reviews went up. Like, what did they think was going to happen? Now, to solve a problem of their own creation, Fianna Fáil is ably assisting Fine Gael, this time in government, by taking a sledgehammer to An Bord Pleanála's last remaining vestiges of credibility. And if the Green Party stands over this, they'll be signing their own political death warrant. And the awful thing is, they know this is wrong. Minister, at what point will Fianna Fáil and your Housing Minister learn the lessons of history? While the Social Democrats are in favour of progressive reforms to our planning system, we need a planning process that is entirely independent of political interference and open to scrutiny and legitimate challenge by the public. It's not too late to pull this deeply misguided and damaging plans that will destroy what remains of the credibility of An Bord Pleanála. Minister, I only have one question, and that is, will you do that?
Thank you very much, Deputy Murphy, and you've touched on a number of important issues there in the whole area of planning, and it is the case that the government yesterday approved the new planning bill. It is a draft bill. The bill will be published. It will go into the normal legislative process. There will be pre-legislative scrutiny by the relevant Oireachtas committee, and we look forward to seeing the outcome of that over the months ahead. But I would make a broader point. We do have a choice to make in the country as to whether we want to have a planning system that is Aarhus compliant, that is compliant with EU law, but also that facilitates the development that we need to happen in this country. The building of more homes for our people, investment in renewable energy, technology all over the country, and the delivery of public infrastructure, which you and others will rightly call on the government to consistently deliver? Or do we want to have a planning system where it is simply too easy for planning decisions to get tied up in knots and to join a never-ending queue of judicial reviews, which may ultimately, over a number of years, be determined? The root and branch review that has been led by the Attorney-General and a whole team of national experts in this field is, in my view, a very balanced review. It has recommended a whole series of measures. You have focused on one particular strand of it, but I think it's important to say that at the centre of this is about putting plan making at the heart of our planning system, about bringing increased clarity and streamlining to the legislation and to improve the functioning of the planning system as well. For example, it involves the introduction of a range of statutory and mandatory timelines across the various consenting processes. An Bord Pleanála, which will now be called An Pleanála, will undergo an organisational restructure, will be subject to those statutory timelines, which will be introduced on a phased basis. We will also have the duration of local plans extended from 6 years to 10 years, so that we do have proper medium to long-term planning in relation to how our country develops. And we'll have proper alignment of strategic planning at national, regional and a local level over longer cycles. In relation to judicial reviews will continue to be taken. What we are seeking to do here is to ensure that there are, first of all, timelines included in respect of the various steps in the judicial review process, including for pleadings, hearings of cases and delivery of judgments by the court. And it also does bring clarity as to who can bring a judicial review. In the future, a case can be taken by an individual or by an environmental non-governmental organisation. Groups such as residents' associations will still be able to take a judicial review, but will do so as a group of named individuals rather than in the name of a group or association. And this is to ensure that there is proper legal capacity for the taking of a judicial review before the courts in respect of the planning decisions. And we're also introducing really important cost protections as part of the reforms for those who are taking judicial reviews. So we are underpinning the right to take a judicial review, providing clarity as to who can take it, providing cost protection for those who take it, and then ensuring that there is certainty in relation to timeline for outcomes to the planning process ultimately.
Deputy Murphy.
I've got to say that the strategic housing developments actually slowed things down in that it did result in people taking judicial reviews to the courts. So you can do things that are counterproductive, and I'll point that one out. But just this week, the Public Accounts Committee will get a reply to a piece of correspondence from your own department that told us that the Tribunal of Inquiry into Planning Matters and Payments has not fully concluded yet, but it has totaled 143 million euros to date. We can't go backwards. Political appointments, the independence of Bord Pleanála absolutely has to be sacrosanct. This idea that the minister can decide who are pick the people on the board of An Bord Pleanála, that is political interference. That will not restore the credibility of An Bord Pleanála. It will do the reverse. And when it comes to planning, I've got to say, Minister, the public will have a memory of Fianna Fáil and planning. I really think what's happening today in relation to this decision is retrograde, and particularly around political appointments. It's not acceptable.
Time is up, Deputy. Thank you.
Deputy, you referred to SHDs. Of course, Minister O'Brien has abolished the SHD process. Yesterday, I brought forward a report in relation to ethics in public office. It will lead to a new bill that will be brought forward into the Oireachtas to consolidate the ethics in public office regime. It dates back to 1995. It was updated in 2001 by the SIPO Act, and we do have work to do to make sure that we implement the recommendations that have been made by various tribunals of inquiry, by Greco, by SIPO in terms of their annual reports, and it will be a matter now for this government and the Oireachtas to work in relation to that. The bill that we approved yesterday will undergo full pre-legislative scrutiny, and it's important to give that assurance, and I know that the Joint Oireachtas Committee will do its work competently and professionally. In relation to the issue of appointments to An Bord Pleanála, first of all, it's important that in the short term, while Minister O'Brien's programme of reform of An Bord Pleanála is implemented, that the board can continue to function, that we have a board that can administer planning and that can make decisions. So he has to take this step to make sure that the board can continue to function. But as you well know, he is also setting out a new process in respect of the nomination of members of An Bord Pleanála, which will involve the input of various stakeholders. It will be public, open competition, and it will be transparent and accountable. But he has to make sure in the short term that the board can function and deliver its statutory functions to us as a country.
Thank you very much.